Hello, citizens of Gotham. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching the Political Vigilante. There is only one show that is going on for 7 years and only has 72,000 subscribers. that has been going this long. I should have 500,000 subscribers. Easy. I cannot even break 80,000. So, and one of the reasons is my nonstop coverage of Epstein. I'm convinced of it. Although we get some big views from it, it is insane. So the Epstein information has been rolling out this last week. It is January, what are we at, 9th? More information has come out that we're going to go through in a second. And to talk about this from Status Coup, one of the real true indie journalists who goes on the street. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the fine streets of Gotham City, Jordan Chariton.
Hey there.
How's it going, man?
Good. Just put my baby down and now ready to talk about all things sinister in Gotham.
Thank you for taking the time out. I know it's a little late there for you, and you got a kid and all that. So one of the things, you know, you and I have been talking, I've been on your show a couple times in the last week or so to discuss this on Status Coup. You've covered it a little bit. I obviously have covered this quite a lot, but the newer revelations that have come out. I follow Julie K. Brown, which if anyone out there watching does not follow her, please do. She's the Miami Herald reporter that really broke all of this in 2019. And she's very much staying on top of these new documents that have slowly been being released. And I think they're just going to slow drop these for the next whatever months, man. Meanwhile, no one will get arrested at all. But this is what I'm sorry, this is the WikiLeaks one. This is not, we'll talk about that in a second. But I wanted to talk about these. Sorry, I queued up the wrong ones. We will talk about that in a little bit, but I wanted to, new unsealed documents have come out and are unsealed and unredacted, I guess, the documents. So these are the ones, and this is, first of all, I want to go, this is from Julie K. Brown right here. I just want to read this one. So this is from earlier today. Breaking Virginia Giuffre names including Les Wexner, George Mitchell, and other redacted politicians in newly released deposition. And she throws up after being forced in detail to detail the acts. More to come. This is 5 hours ago. And then we saw the response to that from this woman, Paige S., who I don't know, but she's been covering this since 2008 or 2009. Alas, within Maxwell's objection to produce documents in the section where she lied about not being available to be disposed for family emergency, was actually photographed at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. And then this other woman, Marie, goes through these documents where you see this right here. It's pretty horrific what is said in that. So I wanted to talk to you, Jordan, because we've discussed it on your show, and these new revelations as they're coming out. There's also an alleged that there is a sex tape, but it's alleged, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, that there's a sex tape with a child and Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew and Richard Branson, but that hasn't been confirmed.
Yeah, I was thinking of reporting on that yesterday, but it was too muddy in my opinion because the victim retracted it. She walked it back to the New Yorker a couple years ago, but then again, you kind of have to play mental gymnastics thinking, well, why did she retract it? Was she being threatened? Did she feel that she could be in danger going forward with it? So factually, she did retract it. That's why I didn't report on it. But, you know, she also, in reading her emails, alluded to threats she was getting. So it's kind of, you know, on the merits, she retracted it, but you don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that have I mean, look, Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel both committed suicide in prison. So if those guys are committing suicide in prison, which I don't see them as like, oh, they were so despondent, they couldn't live with themselves. I don't see that happening at all. You got to understand that a victim is probably like, well, if these guys are getting taken out, I'm terrified. And they were flat out threatened. I mean, they were flat out threatened. And if they were brought to the island or the penthouse or in Manhattan or whatever, then God only knows what they witnessed and saw. How many people did they see just kind of, I mean, that's one of the interviews that this is substantiated in an interview that Maria Farmer did, where she said she was trafficked at a young age in the 90s, and she saw just some girls would just disappear. And she was like, I don't know where they went. So factually, she did walk it back, but you have to ask yourself, that's a valid question to ask yourself. I don't think it's tinfoil hatty to ask yourself that question at all. But these new revelations
I've had in a different context, people come on the record, whistleblowers on Flint, covering the water crisis and other things, that then walk it back after being threatened. So it's not like a unusual thing. That wasn't about, sexual abuse or anything like that, but it's not an unusual thing for people with families to, get a sudden burst of, fuck it. I want to do I want to speak out. And then afterwards, something happens and they walk it back and say, don't use my name.
And that's a Flint water crisis, which, while a serious, significant thing, pales in comparison to presidents and world leaders raping children. This is the kind of thing where, the Flint water crisis, someone could maybe lose their job. Maybe it may be prosecuted, but the Epstein stuff is like, if this was prosecuted correctly, these are crimes that would be, R. Kelly's in jail for 30 years. I mean, this is what we're talking about. So
yeah,
it very much stands to reason. So in seeing these new revelations or these new documents or these new by Julie K. Brown, but, depositions with unredacted names now by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who Virginia Roberts Giuffre is probably the most vocal, and I would argue maybe one of the more reputable, not that the other survivors aren't reputable, but Virginia has been so, strong with her legal team and forcing this issue and not backing down and going to civil trials, going to whatever she wants, whatever angles she can do to get the truth out and to get some sort of, acknowledgement to the victims. What do you see this? I mean, this is sort of an ever transforming thing, and you and I have theorized on your show, but as this new information comes out, where do you see this?
Well, first off, I would say on the timing of the releases, it is interesting that they keep releasing these documents since last week, midday, late afternoon. If you work in the media industry, you know that the best time to get stuff out is early morning on the East Coast. That's generally when the news cycle starts. If I'm pitching a story to bigger outlets, I'll be emailing them at like 8:30, 9 a.m. when editors and, reporters are generally getting into the office. By noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the news site, what happened at 9 a.m. Nobody even remembers because everything's moving 100 miles a minute. So I do find that interesting. Like, why is the court waiting to post this stuff like late afternoon? I have my theories. I'm sure you do, but it does. You can post it early morning. You've already done the redactions or what have you. So that's number one. I find it odd that or suspicious that they're posting it later in the day. Secondly, I think that, obviously Bill Clinton and Donald Trump are going to get the biggest attention if they're mentioned. Mm-hmm. But we should point out it's a pretty big deal when you see names like George Mitchell, who is a massive, if you know politics, he was a massive figure in the Democratic Party for decades, served for Bill Clinton, served for Obama as ambassadors and other positions. Bill Richardson, who's died, but was a big figure in the Democratic Party. He ran for president. He was New Mexico governor, another ambassador, I think, to Clinton. These are like these are not backbenchers in the Democratic Party. They're big name people who helped with fundraising and were kind of in the Pelosi category in the Democratic Party. So you don't want to do guilt by association, but you have to figure if this guy's having sex with minors or is in that world, that people within the party, maybe they didn't know every little detail, but might have known something untoward was going on with this guy, both of them. So that you kind of question who, you're on the subway. They say, if you see something, say something. It seems like that did not apply here. And then, of course, Bill Clinton, in the latest batch that came out today, you saw depositions with Virginia Giuffre. I mean, she's publicly stated before this that he was on the island, but you're actually seeing the interviews. And it's kind of a big deal that you could read. I mean, she's saying he was across from me at the table. There was 2 young women next to him. The media is not really talking about that, or certainly not investigating it, but I'm no Trump fan. But with the classified documents case with Trump, for example, they had a TikTok timeline for everything on his lies, rightfully so. But you and I have talked. I mean, you got Virginia Giuffre saying he was at multiple dinners on the island. You have a maintenance worker on the island who Epstein had tasked with creating his own secret comms system, so the phone lines would be private and not be able to be surveilled. He said he saw them. I think it's a pretty big deal that, if it was Trump who said he was never on the island, and a deposition comes out with a woman saying, he multiple dinners. I mean, it would be running nonstop on MSNBC and CNN, rightfully so. But because it's Bill Clinton, I haven't seen anything. So I think that in other stories I've covered, the media is as large a part as the cover up as the actual figures. And in this case, I'm sure if there's ever any justice, we'll find out that the media knew about whether it's Bill Clinton. And there's 2 options with Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and some of the others. They either were directly involved with underage women, which is, of course, a crime and horrid, or they weren't directly involved, but they knew about it and looked the other way, which is also a crime.
Yeah. I mean, and also not to mention, again, with regard to Clinton, it's not only is it eyewitness testimony, it's flight logs. I mean, he flew to the island. I mean, Trump has only flown on he flew on his plane 5 times, but he did not fly to the island. My knowledge is there's no flight logs of Trump flying to the island. Now, I don't believe that makes him innocent, because God only knows what could happen on those planes anywhere. We know Epstein, when he was, in custody in Florida in 2009, he was literally flying his jet around during the day and with trafficked girls. I mean, so Trump could do that. But again, like you say, this should be the leading story. This should be a hard-pressed story. And again, some people in the Trump camp were like, oh, Trump, he's this hero that was going to arrest all of them. It's like, no, at the very least, Trump knew and did nothing and kept hanging out with this guy at the very least. And as you and I have discussed on your show, and I brought it up on this show, but it bears repeating, is again, there's 5 flights that Trump was on. There's all the photos from all the parties. There's the quote that Trump said, he and I like the same type of women, or whatever that quote is. There's Acosta, who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal in Florida, who was put in Trump's cabinet. There's women that were trafficked out of Mar-a-Lago. There's I wish Maxwell, I wish her well when she got arrested and he was still in office. So there's enough hard evidence for the Department of Justice and the FBI to open up a thorough and just an investigation. And as you said, though, the media should be screaming about this. But we know the media has been called off. We know the media is in cahoots just from the Amy Rohrbach interview from the leaked audio or the leaked video from, what was it, 2019, which was like, oh, I had this story 3 years ago. So she had this story in 2016 and they pulled it because they got pressure from Buckingham Palace, and ABC's owned by Disney.
Well, I mean, it's also just one big club and you're not in it. Like ABC, for example, George Stephanopoulos is their biggest star, and he worked for Bill Clinton. Bill, NBC, MSNBC, Comcast owns it. Who held the first fundraiser for Joe Biden? A Comcast vice president, David Cohen, I believe his name was. Union busting company, by the way. But they're all in the same, little cesspool as the Clintons, because it's Clinton world, Obama world, and Biden world. So Comcast has relationships with the Democratic Party, Republican Party too. So also, I mean, I don't think it should be dismissed. We know Bill Clinton likes younger women, because when he was in the White House, he was in his 50s, and had a relationship with Monica Lewinsky, who was in her early 20s. Legal, gross, but legal, but early 20s, 16, 17. That's not that far off. So it's just all of these outlets. The Daily Beast had a direct relationship for a while. Chelsea Clinton was on the board of their parent company. So it just seems to me that a lot of these outlets, whether it's through their parent companies or their lawyers, I mean, I've had stories green-lighted by outlets on Flint and other things and then killed like a week or two before, because the lawyers, have a thing, are too scared or what have you. But it does seem to me, forget alleged sexual abuse, but the flight logs you mentioned, that's an inconsistency. Multiple witnesses, he was on the island. You would think, forget investigating, there'd be some headlines about that.
Yeah.
There aren't. Honestly, I don't even see it covered that much in independent media, even in terms of these countries, not just Clinton. I mean, Trump, I think there's less smoke with Trump as far as was he part of this trafficking ring. But does anyone think Donald Trump would shed an eye or call the police if he knew Epstein or any of these people were with underage girls? So there's, he's a former president. If he knew, that should be investigated. But it's really troubling. I mean, it's really troubling that we know that the New Yorker a few years ago killed part of a story of forget her name, a British journalist. She had allegations from the Farmer sisters of sexual abuse by Epstein, and that was killed. The editor, Franklin Foer, who is legendary for being part of like societal New York City, and kind of being in these circles of Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, not anything untoward, but just like being invited to the cocktail parties and this and that. He said that, the journalist, by the time we were ready to go to press, she added these accusations. But it then came out later through emails that she found these women to go on the record weeks before the story was supposed to go out. So how many Epstein stories have been killed? Not just at ABC, but elsewhere. And I find it very interesting that 2 days ago, when the latest batch came out on Bill Clinton being on the island, when outlets reached out to him, his people, not being on the island, about storming into Vanity Fair to kill a story on behalf of Epstein, that his people just refused to comment. It's very simple. If I didn't do it, I'm going to scream it from the rooftops, because you'd think there's witnesses that saw the former president at Vanity Fair or things like that. So if he didn't, you would think that would help his overall case by saying, you see, they're lying. His people didn't want to say anything.
Right. And there's so many things here. Like we haven't even got into all of these recruiters and women that were complicit in this crime. Like no one's being prosecuted. Like no one's being prosecuted for anything. Like, and there's so many crimes here, and they're going to just slow release this. So let me ask you this, because this is an interesting thing. We're now in 2024. This is a presidential election year. In 11 months, we're going to have a presidential election. In theory, I mean, who knows? This country could go up for grabs and they could do martial law and suspend the election, whatever. Anything's possible in this crazy country. We're going into a presidential election year. The Epstein story keeps unfolding, even though the mainstream media is deliberately, as we just discussed, avoiding it. but it's going to come out. I mean, it's going to keep coming out. And I think someone is going to mention it in a presidential debate or something. Like it's someone's going to mention it. And, you know, you have people interrupting. Like a week or so ago, the Clintons were giving some speech and some rich person awful for them. And someone was like, what about the Epstein, you know, and they got heckled, and people are not letting this go. In the same way, we've got Biden's numbers are in the tank because of the economy, because his unwavering support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. How do you, I know we're getting into sort of crystal ball land a little bit, but you've covered 2016 and 2020 elections pretty thoroughly, and you covered them on the ground. And now we have these new two things here of Epstein, more Epstein revelations. They keep trying to kill this and put it on the, but more Epstein revelations. How do you see this election year? I mean, and then we're not even, there's the wild card of Biden's health. I personally don't think he's even going to make it. I think he's going to drop out, and Kamala is going to run, you know, and they're going to maybe have to force an open primary. Who knows? So how do you, based on all the stuff you've covered, and you've covered this in pretty strong detail on the ground, and you've seen how Bernie got screwed in all of this, how do you see this how do you see this year playing out?
Hey, I think there's a few wild cards. Number one, I don't think it's totally a foregone conclusion that Trump won't drop out. I know most people think that's crazy, but I mean, if you follow Donald Trump, I grew up in New York. The guy's a germaphobe, doesn't like shaking hands. I don't think he'd ever let them take him to prison. I think he'd sooner off himself or, you know, Roman Polanski this shit. And get out of here. And it looks like at least one of these criminal trials is going to start before the election. My guess is the January 6th case. I don't think it's going to be a 6-month trial, which means there would be a verdict before the election. He would appeal if he's convicted. You would think, being a former president, they'd let him stay out of prison on appeal. But if his lawyers, you know, Donald Trump's a megalomaniac, but I also think Donald Trump, particularly his kids, if he thinks there's a real chance of him serving any prison time, I think he would make a deal and drop out and just, you know, say it was the deep state, took down our movement, and start his own network or whatever. So that's obviously speculation, but I think there's a 60-40 chance he would be convicted because I'm assuming the special prosecutor has info that has not been released yet, whether there's a big gap in the White House phone logs that day on January 6th. And there's a lot of information that keeps creeping out about what Trump was or wasn't doing at that time. So I think there's a chance that he could drop out. That's why I think a lot of these Republicans, even the ones that have no shot, are sticking in, just in the event that Trump drops out, that there could be some kind of food fight at the Republican convention. Biden, I think, could pull an LBJ. I'm not thinking so much about his health, but I think his son, who looks like he could serve potential jail time. You know, I think Biden's a deplorable figure, but it does seem genuine that he cares about his family. So I think there could be some sort of sweetheart, you know, bed and breakfast jail stay for Hunter for a month. And Biden would step away. But let's say none of that happens and it's Trump versus Biden. I think this seems a lot more like 2016 than 2020 to me. The dynamics are, you know, Obama and Biden sound pretty similar, saying the economy, you know, it's not where we want it to be, but it's rebounded. But people don't feel that because obviously it's all pixie dust, what they're trying to sell on the economy. Hillary Clinton had no economic message. Biden, as far as I can tell, has no economic message. So
no, he's been building back better, Jordan. Haven't you been build back better enough?
Right. Very much so. I'm making 50 grand less than I made a couple years ago, but I digress. So I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that he's running a Hillary Clinton campaign in terms of, but Trump. And I actually think in 2020, he just got bailed out by COVID. I don't think Biden really won as much as Trump lost because Trump just so badly mismanaged COVID. Frankly, I think if Trump would have signed one more, you know, $1,500 or $2,000 check, he might have won. in 2020. And the real difference for Biden in 2020 was more black people came out in Atlanta, winning in Georgia, in Detroit, winning in Michigan, in Milwaukee, winning in Wisconsin. According to the polls, those black voters that came out for Biden are not coming out again. In addition, young people who came out for Biden and the Democrats in the midterms. That's why the Democrats did not get destroyed in the red wave. They're not coming out. And that was even before this genocide in Gaza. A lot of them weren't coming out because of the student loan, broken promises, $15 minimum wage, firing a super soaker at the climate inferno. So I think there's just a cacophony of real problems. And at the end of the day, you just don't have it's one thing in 2020 when you say, hold your nose, get rid of Trump for Biden, and we'll escape fascism. But when you vote for that, if you're younger voters or the black voters or Hispanic voters that weren't enthused about Biden but went out anyway, and then what you get is going after Julian Assange, supporting this genocide in Gaza, doubling drilling on public lands when you campaigned on stopping it, backdoor trying to privatize Medicare, which isn't getting a lot of attention. His border policy is not as horrible as Trump, but certainly not much different. It's kind of seems like a nicer version of fascism.
Oh yeah, it's the cuddly, the Democratic rainbow flag fascism. That's what the Democrats.
It's like when the Pentagon sends out the tweets with the bomber with the LGBT colors on the wing.
Yeah, you bring up it. I mean, it's really like if all of this crazy stuff does not happen and it is Trump versus Biden, I mean, Biden's gonna lose because his whole campaign. I mean, they're already doing it. If it is Trump or Biden again, Biden's gonna run Trump is bad. That'll be his campaign because what can he offer anybody? I didn't give you student debt forgiveness. I've drilled more than Trump. The economy sucks. And I'm sending all this money to Ukraine and Israel. Like how?
I also think there's one other element. I think it matters who Trump picks as his vice president because remember McCain picked Palin, which really hurt him. Trump, you would think, well, who is Trump going to pick that's going to make anyone more worried than they are about Trump? Well, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I personally, I'm not joking. I think Trump would just choose whoever he's most attracted to. So there's the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, who's one of these. She's like a better looking version of Sarah Palin. She likes toting the guns in commercials and she's a bit of a lunatic too. She's been rumored. So you got Noem, Marjorie Taylor Greene. People have even talked about Lauren Boebert. I think Trump really thinks that he could win if he just stokes the hell out of the base. Picking one, I think he's going to pick a woman. And he's already locked up the evangelicals who clearly have taken a day off from church on the subject of Trump. So I think it's one thing for independents. All right, we have our qualms about Trump, but if he picks like a fellow traveler who's perhaps more loony than him, I think that might be too much of a pill to swallow. And I think he is considering the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, Elise Stefanik, who's been making the round. She's the New York congresswoman who's like taken down the Harvard president and, is on the anti-woke crusade. Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I would look at who he chooses. It'll definitely excite the Fox News base and Trump's base, but it might be too much for the independents who might consider Trump again. And it might actually peel back some of those younger voters or black voters who are like, we can't have this double whammy.
Well, let me ask you, bring up the independents. Let's talk about that. We have a very interesting field of independents, more so than we've ever seen. We've got Dr. Jill Stein running again. We've got Cornel West, who was a People's Party, then he was Green. Now he's running as an independent. You've got RFK Jr., who was running as an independent, or as a Democrat. Now he's an independent. So you've actually have three. And it's something I interviewed Jill Stein last month, and she brought up a good point. She goes, actually, Graham, every time I've run in the past, it's just been me and some libertarian you didn't really know much about. Now there's like a bigger field of, whatever you want to say about RFK Jr., he's got name recognition, as does Cornel West and as does Dr. Jill Stein. What do you see happening? I think because this is it could be the craziest year ever. I mean, Trump could run from prison, like anything. Anything's possible. The scenarios you proposed are very plausible, but this country's nuts, and who knows? There could be a whole nationwide January 6th if Trump does actual jail time or something like that.
Biden could also start a brand new war. I mean, you never know.
Yes. Biden could be so low in the polls that all of a sudden we could get some Hamas attacks Disneyland false flag, and just to try to do what they did for 9/11 to get everybody, the Super Bowl, the Hamas blows up the Super Bowl and everyone will get mad or something like that. Americans won't really pay attention unless the Super Bowl's canceled. So, or the Final Four or something like that. But the Super Bowl is a big one. So how do you see this independent field? Do you see it change? Do you see it having much of an effect? Do you see because 40 to 45% of the country now identifies as an independent, because there was a poll in the Hill that came out right after the midterms that said if it's Trump versus Biden again, 59% of the people polled said they'd vote third party. I think there's a lot of people that are fed up. I agree. Trump is going to get like Lauren Boebert or someone like that to stoke his base, and an anti-woke vice president female will get a lot of votes. There's no two ways about it. But how does this huge voting block of independents that are all over the map? I mean, they're really you talk to independents, and I'm doing some work for open primaries. You interview them and they're fascinating people. They're like, yeah, I'm Second Amendment because I like hunting with my dad, but I'm pro-choice because I don't want the government telling my wife what to do. They don't fit into a box the way the media wants them to. How do you see these three name independents affecting this election?
Unfortunately, I think RFK is the real one that will make an impact. I think I'm a big fan of Cornel West, but it is what it is. I think he made a mistake leaving the Green Party for an independent run. I think more lefties that were kind of Bernie people are actually interested in a third party, and saw hopes in building the Green Party through Cornel West. And since he's run as an independent, I just think the buzz and general interest in his campaign has dipped down. He's not doing much campaigning wise. I mean, right now they're focused on ballot access, but he's not doing much in events and things like that. And he's been honest, it's hard to raise money to do that kind of Bernie traveling all around the country. But I think he would have had a better chance to, be higher in the polls if he was with the Green Party, who does have experience, not success, but at least experience, getting on ballots, running campaigns. So I think he would have had more of an impact if he would have stayed with the Green Party. RFK, I mean, I've made no secret, I'm not a fan, but I think the problem RFK is going to have, believe it or not, most voters don't know the full scope of his statements, shall we say, over the years. I mean, most people are not your audience, my audience, and paying attention to this stuff. They're just agnostic. They watch, 1,000-Pound Sisters or, Real Housewives or NFL, and start paying attention to elections, maybe a few weeks before, in terms of the general election. And I think on both sides, Democrats and Republicans are going to do something bipartisan. They're both going to carpet bomb the airwaves attacking RFK, because in some polls, it looks like he's taken more away from Biden. Some polls, it looks like he's taken more away from Trump. And it's not just vaccines. He said crazy shit about, 5G and certain medications making your boy turn into a girl. And I mean, we're talking all the way back to like the 1980s. So also some kind of sketchy things with his foundation and money. So I think a lot of independent
voters, let's not forget, Epstein, his ties to Epstein now that are coming out.
Yes. So I think a lot of independent voters are just pragmatic. They're not hardcore partisans. They're just moderate or pragmatic, or many cases lean right. And they don't like kooky conspiracy people. And he is, sorry, to tell the truth, but he is. So I think that RFK, once that carpet bombing starts, you'll see his poll numbers go down. But I think really the key here, because the presidency is only really about 5 or 6 states. It's not really running for president of the country. It's running for president of Michigan, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, now Arizona, Georgia. I think Biden's going to lose Arizona and Georgia because he barely won either. He won both by less than a point. Michigan, I think it's going to have less to do with third party and more to do with Dearborn and Detroit, because Biden is significantly losing the Muslim American vote right now. Not losing it to Trump, but a lot less support for him due to his actions or support of Israel's genocide, and that's what it is, of Palestine. And I understand why Biden's not doing it politically, because he thinks if he calls for a ceasefire or pulls the blank check, he's going to lose more Jewish voters. But at the end of the day, in Michigan, I mean, Biden won Michigan by 150,000 votes. That could easily turn, and it could come down to a margin of 10 to 20,000 votes, and you could lose 10 to 1,000 not only Muslim Americans but younger voters in Michigan because of your support of Israel. So I don't know if third party is going to make all the difference. I think it's going to be more what Biden has done or not done. But third parties could make more of a difference in Arizona, big Hispanic vote. Hispanics have been shifting to the right, but, in years past have gone Democrat. Also, I think RFK, it seems to me, I haven't heard one policy from RFK. Maybe that doesn't matter anymore. But every time he's interviewed, he just turns it around and asks people like Crystal Ball, well, what would you do? Or I'm going to have a entourage of economic experts and form councils and shit like that. Whether that will matter, I don't know. But I think RFK, you'll probably start seeing once the general election starts, which the media is already trying to start it because they've already canceled the primary, as we know. I think you're going to see just nonstop ads in the swing states, just about what RFK has said about frogs and 5G and this and that. And it would not surprise me if his poll numbers dramatically dip.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that also we could see, I'm just going to throw this out there and I know you got to run, but I think as Cornel West gets faced more and more, and again, I love Cornel West. I love Dr. Stein. I mean, as Dr. Cornel West kind of faces the reality of lack of ballot access, which the Green Party has better ballot access, and even them, they've been restricted. But as he faces the reality of that, and I asked Dr. Stein this, I mean, she's open to him, like them running together. I mean, she opened up to Bernie after he got kicked out, after he got cheated in 2016. So if Cornel goes, you're right, let's join forces, me and Dr. Stein running as the green ticket, do you see that making enough of an impact, at least getting the 5% that it needs to get federal funding?
I think they could definitely get 5%. I also think Cornel West, and why that would work so much, because I think the Green Party, he'd have more luck fundraising too. I think Cornel West's biggest asset is his mouth. Yeah. He needs to be out there doing rallies. Maybe you're not going to get 30,000 people like Bernie, but maybe you get a few thousand people. I mean, honestly, other than Bernie, I mean, the best speech I ever saw on the road was Cornel West the night before the New Hampshire primary in 2020. It was a packed sports stadium in New Hampshire, and Cornel West, I mean, it was a mix of, a preacher and he, even if you don't like politics or you're not even a lefty, you can't help but kind of be mesmerized. Nina Turner has some of that. But he's not out there, he's just doing interviews and podcasts. And I think if he was out there, which imagine him and Green Party, Jill Stein together, I think that could be really, really effective, and crazier things could happen. I mean, I'm not saying they would win, but if Trump drops out or some of the things we have talked about, get well above 5%. But at a certain point, going on, internet shows is good, but you got to be out there, in Detroit holding a mega rally, or, Atlanta or this and that. Unfortunately right now, that's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. If Trump drops out and Biden drops out, then if Cornel and Dr. Stein join forces, then they could actually, they could maybe even win a state or two. I don't know. They could, at the very least, help down ballot Greens win. That could really shake up the Congress and the Senate and state assemblies and stuff like that, which is what I'd like to see the Green Party focus on, is like a long-term strategy. But yeah, it's all conjecture at this point, because 2024 is going to be absolutely nuts. And
I mean, to me, the bottom line is it's not as sexy. It won't get clicks. I'm not telling people to check out and not vote, but I would focus on labor right now, because whether it's Biden, Trump, who gives a shit? I mean, I personally think objectively on the things that matter, Trump is really scary and a lot worse. But I personally wouldn't vote for Biden again. I did it in 2020. I held my nose, and he did a lot of things that just were not much different than Trump. I'm not telling other people how to vote, but to me, structurally, the only things working in terms of actually helping people's lives materially is getting involved in strikes like the UAW, organizing like Amazon, Starbucks, tenants unions. That stuff is actually yielding results, as opposed to this endless, the most important election of our lifetime. And, the 25 emails by lunch of Save Democracy for the DNC and the rest of them. I think voting local elections, state, Congress matter. I'm not telling you not to vote for president, but we've seen this thing. So since I started paying attention in 2004, that's when I was in college and I started really paying attention to politics. I've literally heard it every single most important election. Yeah, it's the same broken record. And honestly, I saw it up close. The resurgence of labor militancy, which happened with the UAW strike, even small things like the UAW president, wearing an Eat the Rich shirt, throwing the contract offer they got in the garbage on a live stream, refusing to show up for the symbolic handshake. That stuff really matters, because the last time we had any form of economic equality in this country, with the disclaimer, not including Black, Hispanic, and indigenous people, was in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, when we had much higher labor union percentages. That's why the Kochs, the Waltons, with the Democratic Party's help, started taking a battering ram to unions. So I see Rome was not built or destroyed overnight, but I see the success we're starting to have in rejuvenating the labor movement in this country. That's where I think has the most chance of yielding results, and that's where I'm personally focusing my coverage. But I guess on the election, get your popcorn. I also think there's a small chance Trump, if he listens to his advisors, could pick Nikki Haley as like a Mike Pence with different parts. And if that happens, I actually think Trump will win in a landslide, because I think Nikki Haley will be very attractive to the independent voters, because she sounds kind of moderate and sensible. But I don't think Trump is that smart to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, the labor, and I would add the entertainment unions. I was walking a picket line all summer, and it was powerful. It was a powerful thing. I was there for the 2008 strike, the writer strike, which was like, okay. And the writers kind of buckled too soon, in my opinion. But this summer, man, it was no joke. And so many people were fired up, and, SAG did not buckle quickly when they, it was really impressive. And I think a lot of show business people who are typical, like, they're usually neoliberal, pro-Democrat types. They got kind of radicalized to the labor movement, and they realized, oh, maybe we should, when we're back in production, make sure we go to a Starbucks that's been unionized. I mean, there was literally more like people really were understanding how valuable labor is. And I think, we're waking up to this, like, how important labor is. And it was all happening that summer. The UAW was on strike, SAG was on strike, Amazon. I mean, there's been over 200 Starbucks have been unionized or something like that. I mean, you probably know better than I do that's been, and I agree. I think labor is where the focus needs to be. And again, vote, I vote, get involved, vote in your elections. Ballot measures are important. Local elections are important. Vote for some third-party person. Don't support these two parties is what I pitch to my audience. But first of all, let's let go of it. Electoral politics is going to fix it. It's not. Like we talked about, strikes have already fixed it. Like, lives have gotten better. My ability.
I just talked to a worker that I interviewed on the picket lines at the UAW who was about to lose their house, and now they've saved their house through their raise. So it actually works and makes a big difference.
Yeah, it works. They're saving their house. So I just shot a pilot for this game, for the Anything Can Happen game show in December. We're editing it. We're going to start selling it. And I feel very happy that I'm going to be out there selling a TV show with a better contract in place with my union than I have, because one of the reasons I was picketing, I picketed several times in front of Sony, because Sony owns the Game Show Network. The Game Show Network owns the show Cram that I used to host, that they started rerunning that show 2.5, 3 years ago. And I have gotten $0 in residuals. I'm the host of the show. I'm in 90% of the shots. That was an after show. It was before the SAG-AFTRA merger. And one of the reasons I was picketing is I'm getting no money for a show that is on TV right now. Someone's making money off of it. I'm not. Right. So I feel more confident that when I sell this show to one of the major networks, I'm going to have a better deal in place. And I'll be getting residuals 10, 20 years from now, which is what I should have been getting today. So, and that money affects daily life. Identity politics, maybe, but like, what was my grocery bill today? What did it cost to fill my tank of gas? What does it cost to buy school supplies for my kid? That's what affects people. And when you make those things better for people, they don't forget. When you make them worse, they really don't forget.
Well, I think there's another thing also. I mean, I don't have like a, it's anecdotal, but I covered the UAW strike I was out there twice for, I don't know, total 20 days. And I would say that a lot of the people that were involved in part of the strike, and a lot of the people that were supporting it that are not union workers, are non-voters. And non-voters are the biggest voting bloc in America. There's over 100 million people who don't vote. So I think a lot of people that are just totally checked out, don't believe in politics, cynical, rightfully so, and just have been that kind of non-voting class. A lot of them are starting to get involved with not just labor unions, but tenants unions, mutual aid. So that's good. Maybe we won't turn them into voters, but at least they're getting involved with direct action and labor. So I've seen that, not just UAW, but other things where union workers I speak with said, "Oh, I haven't voted in like a decade. What's the point?" But they're militant or getting involved for the first time in strikes and things like that. I also think it's a big deal. It's not, it's not going to get headlines now, but UAW behind the scenes right now, they're trying to get other unions in other industries to line up the expiration of their contract with the UAW's contract in May 2028. If that happens, I don't know if you can call it a general strike, but it might be the closest thing to that, because you could have auto workers, healthcare workers, retail workers, all at strike at once, which that actually, the media likes to huff and puff like, oh, will this auto strike hurt the economy? Like, that could hurt the economy if different industries are on strike at the same time. And I say, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Shut it down. No, it's a great point. And also, to bring this up one more, the fact that the UAW has come out in support of Palestine, that's an American car manufacturing union is in favor of a ceasefire. I mean, that is big. I mean, that was like, that's a
Ford helped Ford and I think GM helped the Nazis make cars back during the Holocaust. So quite the opposite for good for the UAW. Yeah.
Well, Jordan, I know it's getting late on the East Coast. I appreciate you taking the time, my friend, and always great having you on the show. Where can people watch and support Status Coup and everything?
Status Coup on YouTube. That's COUP. We are not as suppressed anymore as Graham. I'm sorry to hear your problems. But yeah, we're on YouTube. We do, as far as I know, we're the only independent outlet doing on the ground reporting across the country. I think we've covered over 10, actually more than that, probably closer to 15 of the pro-Palestinian protests in the country, in New York City in particular. I've been hearing it from my Zionist family as a result. But we've been covering a lot of the pro-Palestinian protests. I actually have my first book coming out this year on the Flint water cover-up, because I've been there almost 20 times. Of course, the media and most of the country have forgotten about that, but Flint, nearly a decade later, still doesn't have clean water, and no one has been put in prison for poisoning this city. So I'm going to be going back there soon for my 20th trip since 2016. We're going back to East Palestine in February for the 1-year anniversary of an American company literally nuking a small town in Ohio, which has caused endless suffering and sickness. There's actually there's a man I just spoke with who now is getting double mastectomy because he has breast cancer. A man in East Palestine. Other people are bleeding out of their noses nearly a year later. I spoke with one mother whose 9-year-old son had blood coming out of his rectum. They literally detonated about 20 to 30 toxic volatile gases over this town because in a hearing, the manufacturer of the chemicals in the train said, I told them there was no imminent urgency to blow up the cars. That didn't get headlines on CNN. I mean, I could go on and on. We're probably going to go back to Cop City to cover the protests. So we cover a lot with not a lot of money. We don't take any money from anybody on Epstein's list or, the Waltons or the remaining Koch brother or any of the Democrats. So if you got $5 a month, that's all I ask. statuscoup.com/join.
Right on, dude. Well, you're doing great work, man. You're really, really out there on the streets doing it. And I got mad respect for your coverage of everything and your team of people that you have. You have a great team of people that are out there doing on the street. Your coverage of the UAW this summer was really impressive. So go support Status Quo, everybody. And thanks for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely. Take care.
See you later.